Well, that was nice and soothing little music there, so that's pretty nice. Hopefully everything is connected up. We have lots of different channels going on the streaming and everything. So what we're here to talk about today is there was a tweet about a week or so ago. I don't know, time's blurry, pandemic, yay. Where I was talking about I needed to test an extension and I needed to create thousands of records. I needed a good pile of about 100,000 entries. And to do that in an efficient way, I was like, well, I need to spend the least amount of time and least amount of code making that thing. So I'll use the testing libraries and the testing toolkits to generate a bunch of transactional data. And very reasonably, I was asked, how did I do that? And I will say, first of all, that the only reason I do know how to do that is Luke. I still got all my different places tagged of where I learned this from. So his book is coming out, second edition in January on the 11th. So I'm looking forward to that. To make this a little more fun and interesting and a little more back and forth with folks, the original folks who asked me the how did you do that, I invited them to come join me today on this live stream. So thank you for coming, Matthew and Steve. So I figured you guys would be great to invite on. I know you both are either unfamiliar with some of the development aspects or relatively new in the past year or two to working with the development side of Business Central. So this is a nice way of let's go through some of the basics and that sort of thing. So welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's chat a little bit about what exactly is the testing toolkit, because that I think is one of the first mysteries and questions that I think really trips up a lot of people. So one of the great things that they give us in Sandbox, and particularly in the Docker images, and I've got a BC19 Docker, is we have the option to install what is referred to as the testing libraries. It's a question that if you've set up some of the Dockers using the BC Docker or container management tools from Freddy, you'll have seen the option of do you want to install the test libraries. And the second option in that list, and I can bring up a screenshot of that for those who want to see it, but the second option in that list installs a bunch of extensions during that process. It installs not only the test runner functionality and some of the test libraries and all those sort of things, but also installs these test libraries extension. And there's a whole bunch of testing related toolkits that it will put into your system. Super cool and helpful, but it's not always obvious, well, what do I do with that? And where a lot of people make use of these tools is they'll write automated code to do the testing toolkit. So you open up your test runner or you build into your pipeline, I want these automatic tests to happen. But that's not their only use and value. There is a whole bunch of different things that you can do with that, and there's many, many shortcuts that you can use to generate data. So your first stop when you're wanting to make use of starting to make use of the test libraries is you have to add to your test generation extension. And I've gone ahead and created a little test data generator extension, all the basics. There's nothing in it other than some basic settings like launch JSON against my Docker and some of the different settings. But you'll notice I have no dependencies. And the trick to using the test libraries is we need to depend on those test libraries. And it's not obvious what you need to do. If you ever need to chase up the ID and all the different things that you need to import that, if you come into the extension management and come to the test libraries and click on this, it'll show you that here's the name, here's the version, publisher, and the app ID. All of the things that you need to create the dependency. You guys might already know that, you might not already know that, but I figured it'd be good to talk about it.
That's a good tip, by the way. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so it's not obvious when you're looking at it, especially when they're green installed, that these are actually links that you can click on and open up and see these details. What would be pretty cool is if there would be a nice little button here where we could copy that into the into our dependency tree in the right format, but we don't quite have that yet. So I've gone ahead and grabbed all of the dependencies that we'll need today for pretty much most of the testing code units, or extensions, just so that way I have lots of them, and it helps to keep the format. There we go. Okay, so what I've gone ahead and added into here is the test runner, which we're not going to use today, but that's typically what we would use for some of the automated testing tools. And then just in case we need them, I'm not sure the dependency structure between the test scenario, different test applications, so just bringing them all in. Our main thing that we need for today is this test libraries. So if you haven't installed your Docker with those testing toolkits, when you go to try to download symbols with these dependencies, and I set up two different scenario Dockers, one with the test libraries, one without, if I choose the one without the test libraries, it'll try to send the requests and it'll give us a bunch of errors to let us know that those test libraries aren't available in the container I'm at. And that is usually the case when you're working with on-premise. The on-premise one doesn't have these installed by default usually as well. So I have a different Docker container that has all of these dependencies, and it should go zooming right along, and symbols have been downloaded. And that brought in all of these different application libraries. And in my case, I've downloaded from two different builds of Docker, so I've got a few duplicates. But our main thing is this test libraries. And if we take a look at this, I have an extension installed that lets me just click on the .app file and see all of the contents of that. So we can take a look and see in here is a whole host of these library code units, library sales, library random, library item tracking, purchase, utility. There's many different applications, different extensions in here, cash flow, journals. So almost every part of the system, there are these shortcut helpers. Timesheets, human resource, almost every part of the system, there's something in here, which is really powerful and really cool. And let's talk about why that is. In my case, what I was doing was I needed to create a whole ton of transactions in BC. So if we take a look at my demo environment, I had just grabbed the first 5 items in the list. I created a new location. I turned on the warehousing module, and I did a warehouse adjustment to bring all that stock in because nothing makes data churn like the warehouse entry table, especially if you've done full pick and pack and put away. So the warehouse entries under all of these transactions was enormous. I did them one by one at a time. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a similar sort of process where I'm going to take a few of these items, say maybe 3 of these conference bundles, and I'm going to adjust in some stock for them. And what we'll do is we'll create some orders for these to deplete those orders over time, because for whatever reason in our testing scenario, we need to be able to look at the item ledger entries of the items in question. So for our very first thing we'll try to do, and I'm not familiar enough with the with the Cronus data that I will probably get myself in trouble. Let's see, we'll use 1925W, and we're going to bring this into our main location, and we'll bring in 10,000 pieces, some big numbers, so that way we can churn through a bunch of them. Because after all, I want some stock, I want to see them coming in and out, and all that fun stuff. So, and I think the 1953W is also going to be a bundle here. Nope. 29 and 65. Cool. So these will be our 3 for today that we'll use lots of. And we'll go ahead and enter some different amounts for those, so that way we get related value entries and all that fun stuff. So 55, 66, and 77. There we go. That way we can see some costing and all that sort of whatnot. And we'll just go ahead and post those. Hopefully that goes through. I believe main's a basic inventory location. So, yep, there we go. We now have one ledger entry for each item, which is not a great pile to test with. So, cool. All right. So our goals for today is we need to make a new code unit that will generate lots of orders for this. I typically will start these as a code unit so we can potentially run them as a job queue. And then if I want to have like user configurable settings, like how many orders should we make, I will make a page that connects up to that code unit, and that usually works pretty well. So let's make ourselves a generate orders code unit. Oh yeah, sure. And we'll grab. I'm not turning on ID Ninja for this particular extension. I'm okay with that. Wonderful new extension. If people watching this haven't tried that out yet, I strongly recommend it. It's great. So, okay, so I've got some settings in place that it'll give myself the nice prefix and make it the right name. So that's part of why I wasn't too picky about the tidying up there. Those of you watching who are devs, you know what I'm talking about. Prefixes are important in the app source world. Not that I'll ever publish this. So, for our starters, and I'm not going to go too crazy with typing things out. I did prep a few functions ahead of time, so that way we're not sitting here staring at me typing over and over again. So we're going to create a new procedure where we're going to take a variable that is how many do we want to post of orders to post. And we are also, because I'm a big fan of having feedback, I like to also have some global variables shortly, just copying and pasting them while I've got them, of start time, end time, and run time. So that way, if I'm doing this manually in UI, we'll have that info. So I'm skipping over a lot of BC basics because the real meat of today is making sure that we've got the different things that we're doing. So what I did before was I had an item list, which is just this list type that I made myself a list format here to be lazy and easy about which items are involved. So that way I don't have to worry about it. I do love that primary keys are linked, but it does make copy and paste real hard. I don't know if you guys have had that sort of challenge that I'm fighting with on this one, but
all the time.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that they come up with a clever way. I don't have a good suggestion, but a cleverer way that I could make that then copy instead of.
I miss copy cell.
Yeah, just the right click and I want to copy this cell, but nope. So, all right, and 1965 W. There we go. Cool. So that's just going to be my basic. I'm not putting this in front of a customer sort of solution to. I want to have a list of items that if someone came back to me and said, "Can we do that with a different set of items?" Sure, I can just change this for them. So what we're going to do then is we're going to do a loop in here to do a loop based on the quantity of how many we're wanting to post. And just because I'm a compulsive sort of person, once it's all done, we'll do an end timestamp and we'll show a nice message. If we're running this manually, we'll say how long it took to actually do the posting process. Which if those of you watching along didn't know about this and you're like, I don't remember what exactly this message was, AJ reminded me of this tip: hold down control over it and there you go, here's your label message. So this will tell someone created and posted orders and it took whatever amount of time. So little tip while we're at it. Okay, so now the real what we're here for stuff. Whenever we're doing a big giant loop like this in a test environment, things are probably going to go wrong. An option that I like to do is every so often, I just need a big giant pile of data. If we hit an error, I don't want to lose the big giant pile of data I've done so far. So I'll do something silly like this at the end of my loop where I say, you know, every 100 records or so, throw down a commit. So that way, even if something blows up in the process, every once in a while it makes it a permanent change to my data set. Which is a nice thing if you do something silly like, oh, I don't know, fill up your transaction log and your SQL Server croaks halfway through generating a big giant pile data set. This at least will get you some of that time back. You don't lose all of it. So, okay. Typically, whenever I'm doing a routine like this is the meat of things, but I want an action to happen. So what I really want to have happen right now is I want to create a sales order, and I want to create a set of lines for that sales order. So in this sort of linguistic framework, I'm a big fan of, I will typically write out everything that I want to do in comment first, and then create functions to match those comments, remove the comments afterwards, because then you have nice readable code. So here I've got create sales order and create sales lines. Pretty basic stuff. We'll use David's wonderful, I think his extension that'll give us the nice easy create these functions. So boop, there we go. We'll do var on those because we want to pass back the resulting sales headers and everything. And now here in these functions is where we're going to start using those testing coding libraries. So for our create sales order, we're going to use a library called library sales. So let's talk about what the heck is in here, because I think this is where a lot of people will run into, what does this library do? And let's go take a look at the definition of this. So if you open this up and scroll on down to the bottom, you'll see that it is a good giant chunk of like 1,500 lines of code of just stuff. There is a nice little extension called AL Outline, which we can use to real easy get a view of what's actually in this library object here. So let's take a look through this because these are cool. For example, we have create customer that we can call that will literally do exactly that. It creates a customer and it spits back a number. Or you can create customer and pass in a record and get back that customer record. And it will automatically go through a bunch of things where it will try to find payment methods. It'll try to find your posting group info. It'll try to find any VAT info for you that you might need. And it will update the number series. It inserts the customer and then gives them the same name as the customer number. It sets all the payment terms and posting groups for you, and then spits back a customer that's effectively ready to go. And you can do other fun stuff with that, like if you need to do a specific posting group, well, sure. There's different flavors of these customer calls. So maybe you're doing an elaborate tax setup and you need a particular VAT posting group to be involved in this customer. Well, here you go. Create a customer with VAT posting group. It does the exact same thing as the customer call. Create customer, passes that in, and then it just updates the VAT posting group to the one you want. So really cool stuff. And then it gets into, after all the customer stuff, we get into all the document stuff. So you can create a generic sales header, whatever you want. You pass in the sales header, and you can even say what document type and which customer is involved. Or they have shortcut ones where you can say, I just want to create a sales order or sales invoice for a given customer number. And you pass in your sales invoice or sales header and your customer header, and away you go. So we're going to make use of that. And in my case, I am going to do create orders. Let's see here. And I'm using create sales order with location. In my previous test where I was using the full-on warehousing location, I had a full warehousing location. So I'll just change this to main so that I know that I'm using the warehouse where I adjusted all that stock in. And additionally, we're going to say we'll use customer number 10,000 because why not? It's Cronus. Good old Cronus. And there we go. That's it. It created a sales header. Nothing too fancy about that. And the next little fancy bit to use here is we just need to create the sales lines for the items that we want to use. Now up here, we had declared the items to use as a global variable and added these, so we have nice easy access to that inside of our create sales lines. So let's grab a snippet here from my side and just paste this in, talk through it. So questions so far about what we've done, by the way?
Nope, it's good.
Cool.
I'm familiar with the test libraries, so I'll have questions later.
Sounds good. And when I say questions, that also means any of you guys watching, I do have chat on, so I'll see them. And let's see, create sales lines then. Nice and easy stuff. We're going to say, okay, we're going to, for each item in item number to use, we will go ahead and create a sales line using the sales header that we are passed in. And this create sales line call takes parameter of type, so we can tell it that we want a sales line type of item. We can tell it which item number and what quantity. So I'm doing 1 here, but I could do 500 per order, whatever we wanted to do with that. So now that's created all the orders. So if I were to run this now with a parameter that passed in the integer, I'd get however many orders for that customer with those items. Don't have to think about it at all. And that's a tiny amount of code to be able to do all of those steps. But we also need to do some posting on that. Now, in my case scenario, I was doing warehousing, so I was also doing create warehouse shipments, and I was doing some different steps around creating the pics and posting the receipts and all that fun stuff. So typically a lot of environments will have stuff hooked up to release. So I'll do a quick little procedure on releasing the order, because you don't know, maybe your customer environment that you're testing this in has a whole bunch of functionality that is hooked up to the release event, so it's probably a good idea to run that. And here we can just use the standard base release document. We don't have to do anything special test library wise. Now, I don't have anything in the hopper for my test code for non-warehousing posting. So let's chase down how do we then post ship and invoice sales order with the sales header. And there we go. And we'll create the procedure for that. It's still just mostly a stylistic habit thing. I like being able to read this step will do these actions, whether it be one little step or 10 lines of code. It's very clear exactly what's happening. There's no real limit to what we can do for function names, so let's be descriptive. So okay, so my guess in this case is that there's probably some helper functions in our sales library for posting, because there are some steps involved in the posting process that we don't want to have to figure out how to code that. And lo and behold, here's some posting routines. So let's see here. And there were actually release options too. So there is a release sales document. It literally does what exactly I just did, which is call the base underlying release functions. So that's fine. But let's do our post sales document. And you'll see here, it just takes a footprint of the sales header we want to post. And if we want to do ship, and if we want to do invoice, and it will spit back the code, and my guess is that that is the posted document number. If we look down here, yep, So whatever it's posting to, which I believe will end up being the shipping invoice number, rather. But that's fine. We don't need the return value, so we won't use it. So once again, our library sales is going to save the day here on this. So we'll grab that variable. We could absolutely make this a global variable because I'm using this over and over again. There's no advantage to it being local, except it's really easy to copy and paste this between objects. So sometimes I'll make things local variables. I'll make 6 of them because then they're highly mobile. Again, that's a style and preference thing. So we've got our library sales. And we can do post document. You can, for example, do post document in email, which is kind of neat. And you can do a few other batch postings and stuff like that. So we'll do a post document and we'll see our options and we'll grab sales header. And do we want to ship? Yep. We want to invoice? Yep. Here we go. So that's about it. I mean, most of this 80 lines is fluff. Realistically, if you were to ask me to write this as minimally as possible, I wouldn't do any progress bars. I wouldn't do a fancy list. I'd just call this function 3 times with those item numbers, and I wouldn't even make them separate functions. You could probably, in about 20 lines of code, bam, just go through, create, and post all of those. And for sanity's sake, on whenever this runs, I'll set this to do the posting routine with 100 by default. And there we go. I could run that in a job queue and schedule that to run and then just walk away and not even think about it. And then separately, we can also create a test page that just calls this function with a parameter of however many would you like to make. And you could get fancy with it and pass in which customer number instead of just defaulting it, all sorts of different bits. So I hope that answers the core question that you guys had for, how are you using the testing tools. And the short answer is you don't have to use them in the context of a testing code unit. You can use them in real code units, which is pretty neat.
I have many questions, but Matthew, you have any you want to start with?
Oh God, this is yes, it's answered my question. I just wanted to know how you did it, and I was really hoping for it to be a much more straightforward answer, because as you know, I can't write any code. So every time I have a conversation with either of you guys, I go, oh, I have to start learning how to do this. This is a nightmare. So this kind of stuff's really useful because I find I just eat time setting up junk to mess around with, and it's painful doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I've now got some packages that I keep sort of in the background and go, just load that up. Just going to chuck these customers in because I know that they work and I know that this setup works. But what happens is if you've got a customer that's got a slightly funky posting setup, then that just fails and it's pointless. You end up working harder to try and set your test script up than you would otherwise. Whereas this would solve that problem because you can sort those variables out beforehand. Mm-hmm. So I'm regretting my misspent youth really, not learning this stuff earlier.
Well, on the bright side, I didn't know any of this stuff about a year ago, so you didn't miss too much.
Yeah. and also the fact that there are libraries that you can then use to reference in your code that's fantastically helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. And that can be a great way. For example, if you're setting up a company for a customer and you're set up all the warehousing stuff, and you go, okay, I want to make sure that my setup is correct. So I want to post a receipt. I want to post a put away. I want to post a pick. I want to post the shipment. Yeah. I want to do a movement journal. You could code all that up into a code unit like this, or a code unit and a page where you click the button, I want to test this. And in your environment, you could create a sandbox and deploy this into that. Or if you're on-prem, you could do a copy company and bring all that setup data into your test company, hit go, and make sure that you've got all your setup right.
I've had that exact scenario today in that it's my last freelance client who's now they're a client of the partner I work for, and I was on the phone to her earlier on today, and she's going, I need to create 3 more companies, and I said, oh well, I created, I think it was 18 months, 2 years ago for you. There was a template company, so we scrolled down those 2 companies, and there it is at the bottom, Z template, and I went, oh, let's have a look in there. I had a look in there, and it was fine, and I thought, yeah, that's good, and then I said, look, we'll copy it and create your new company. So we copied it, created the new company, and then she said, so is this just good to go? And I went, I've got a feeling that when you do a couple of test postings, it's going to chuck an error, and I can't remember if I corrected it or not. And of course, this would have saved me that problem. So, well, I left her with it to play with, and she's doubtless going to call me back tomorrow and go, what does this mean? And send me a little screenshot, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I didn't set up that posting group, and it needs to be set up properly.
So yeah, you could absolutely use this in conjunction with implementations where you create test pages for people that you can say, okay, you're in charge of setting up these posting groups. We've done some classes around this. I've set up a routine that'll take all of your customers, and in a test company, I'll post all of the transactions that you guys are going to be doing and make sure if there's any problems that it could potentially spit those problems back out and let you know, hey, I tried to post a sales order for customer ZYX and the VAT posting group wasn't set. Yeah. So you could potentially use this during an implementation to help validate customer setups, which I think speaks really highly towards a lot of their onboarding efforts that they're doing right now.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, that would speed things up no end. Mm-hmm. Because you do find, I mean, that's the thing, you find yourself running around during a go live with people going, excuse me, I've just tried to do this. You go, oh, crap.
Yeah. So I would say that's one of the things I've learned a little bit in the past few months too, is that, the automated testing book focuses on using these toolkits to test your code, but there's no reason in the world you couldn't also use this to test setups that customers are doing and helping them define what are the operations that you're going to be doing, and is there going to be any problem tomorrow when we run that. We're at the go live is on Monday. It's the week before. We can say we've wrote all of these test pages, and you can just go ahead and go do and go, are you actually ready?
Let's try and break it.
And I think that would be an interesting strategy. I haven't tried it yet, so I can't swear it'll work. But I think that would be probably a really interesting strategy for, are we ready to go live? Yeah. Well, we've carefully documented all your business processes. We've written them all into this validation suite. Hit go. Does it work? So that might be neat.
Interesting idea.
It's a good idea. I like that. Well, that gives me the fear, though. The idea of doing it for the first time just makes me feel a bit sick.
Yeah. All right. Well, so, Steve?
It's got to be your go, Steve.
Yeah, I've got several, so interrupt me at any point here. So we use the test libraries for our app source application to perform automated testing. And it works well in that scenario. The one question that we had is, because when we use it with the test runner, it's automatically rolling that data back. So what does, say, I don't recall, are you creating a customer record in this test of yours, or are you using an existing Kronos customer?
And that actually connects to a question that was asked in chat. Christian had the question of, are you relying on Kronos setup data? And in this case, I was being lazy. I knew I was going to be doing some operational tests in Kronos. So I didn't do anything where I was creating the customer as part of this transaction. If I were to be doing this in a smart way, what I would probably do is, instead of prepping the item list the way I've done it here, is I would actually create those 3 items, and then I would create the customer. And those routines in the library will do all the fun stuff of numbering them for you. You don't have to worry about, do I have my number series set up and all that silly stuff.
Yes, and to answer or to address Christian's question, it's an excellent point. And Luke, in the book, which I think we all highly recommend, in Luke's book, he explained that you want to be responsible for creating your own test fixtures, as I believe he calls them. And so that means everything from scratch. And the reason I asked about the customer is because we relied upon Cronus, a Cronus customer, and we discovered that the Cronus customer data is not good. It actually has some errors in it, and it caused our test to work when it should have failed. And so that is a big catch to this is
Yeah.
anything you rely upon in the Cronus data is potentially not a valid test. And what the headache in there comes in, at least with an automated testing scenario where you want to be 100% accurate, is okay, well, we need to create our customers. Well, we need to create our posting groups. Oh, we need to create our accounts. And you have this dependency tree that starts to make this a non-trivial process, right? Because you keep drilling down and down and down till you're getting down to the foundational setup. It's like, oh, we didn't have this posting setup correct in Cronus. Oh, we need to go fix that too. And so, yes, on the surface, you can whip out some very nice looking data very quickly if you have your foundation data fixture prepared. So that is one caveat. And so,
One
yeah, go ahead.
one thing I will suggest is when you're building a test code unit, this is actually a pretty good guide of what setups do you have to make your text fixtures not assume anything, because the book that I wrote assumes an empty company. And so that you can use as kind of your checklist, just even chapter by chapter of like, okay, I need to have these all set up. And that'll give you a lot of info to what should I be thinking about if I need to make a sterile empty company functional. That gives you a roadmap to what should I make. And the first time you build that full stack of all that underlying stuff, if you do that as a couple of big giant code units, you can copy and paste those over. So, or do dependencies on your testing.
Excellent. I do have a copy of your book, but I will admit I have not read it yet.
Time.
So thank you for the reminder. I need to go back and do that. So, by the way, in case anyone doesn't know, I'll do the plug for you. Jeremy has a book, The First 20 Hours of Business Central. So that's definitely right up my alley. So I need to review that.
Yeah, because
so
it'll get you
the,
through the empty company to I can post invoices.
Excellent. So I think I need to do that because we have been working with the Cronus company in the Docker container in our DevOps pipeline, and it's gotten us by, but we've already been bit twice by, I think it's twice by data that's invalid in Cronus. It's literally like not even a valid record. You couldn't manually set that record up that way. And so we now realized, we have to set everything up from scratch. It's a problem. And so my bigger question is, I have many other small ones, but I'll just jump to the big one. I have users who are not developers who need to populate test data. So we're building an app source app. Yep, we need 100 customers, we need 100 items, we need 1,000 orders, and what if one day this user who is not a developer says, well, I need these to be US customers. Tomorrow it's US, Canada, Mexico, and then it's Europe. And what if we need non-inventory items, inventory items? And you can just see the permutations explode here. We had a situation where we needed a customer, but then we need a customer with a different billing address. And, all those permutations, given that, and this is just in our product testing phase, right? With our automated test scenarios, given that, I debated endlessly, which is why I haven't tackled this project. Should we use a tool that is an end user tool that allows the end user to work with CSV or Excel files like configuration packages? They can then modify that data. They can have the configuration packages to do whatever scenario they want to pull the data in, and it's all end user stuff. Or do we take the more complex but perhaps more highly tailored approach of AL data import or data creation tool. And that's where I got stuck. And I was hesitant to invest all that time in AL if my end users who are not developers could not modify it.
Yeah, makes sense. The answer I would say today would be to do a bunch of config packages because it is so easy for the end users to be able to modify that data and work with it. But that, in the category of things we don't have time for,
Yep. Well,
that was
and to be
why.
fair, creating all those configuration packages is a monumental task on its own. That is by no means trivial or easy. The only part that's easy is when the user has all their data files and just clicks import, right?
Yep.
It's a huge, huge task.
That
And also, configuration packages don't always work as smoothly as you would like them to. So anyone who's
Exactly.
tried, anyone who's or quickly, yeah. I mean, I've
Yep.
got a project
Yep.
at the minute where they've got 350,000 customers, and we are still working out how we
Yep.
do that prior to go live, because they have a live website where the customers are changing their information all the time. So they're going to close. They're going to close on a Friday. We're going to put them live on a Monday. We've got to get 350,000 changing records in that time using config packages. But I mean, anyone who's used a config package to put in a chart of accounts will be familiar with that kind of looping through that you have to do, where you have to you load it and it goes. There's no posting groups, so you go, oh, I'll
Yep.
put the posting groups in, and then you load it again, and it goes. Well, the posting groups then go, but there's nothing. This isn't there, and so you have to kind of do it iteratively.
Yep.
And an end user doing that is going to just go, it's broken. I don't want to touch it because I'm really scared now. You've given me a
Yeah.
scary thing to do, and now it's making loud beeping noises, and I'm just going to go and hide under the desk now.
And I had mentioned earlier in the year one of the objectives that I really would have liked to have done, but unfortunately just time is challenging for sure, is I really would like to do an open source project to create Kronos companies that are generated Kronos companies. And the intention was always from the beginning to make those fully open source. They're a public GitHub repo to generate that, and and Steve, your experience is exactly why I wanted to do that.
It's a great idea.
That some way or another you could tweak some of the different settings that you needed. Like I needed this to work in a US1 database because, gosh, I need that 1099 code field filled in, versus I need to be over in the EU to have all the VAT fields and be able to run a VAT statement against it. All of those things to me were objectives to make different settings. So with any luck, maybe 2022, I will have a few apps in AppSource that are flying off the shelves virtually, and I can spend my time making fun stuff that will help everybody.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and I do empathize with the Business Central team and every single ERP package that has a test company, right? I mean, I don't think any package has a test company or sample data that is as complete or as accurate as we would want, right? So it is a very real challenge. Yeah.
My hunch is that they have a strong desire to go down the path of making official packages that align with different business models. This is complete speculation, no insider info, but when they added to the company list the create new company button that now triggers a wizard that gives you optional company types that you want to make, that feels like the beginning of a framework to me.
Yeah, me too.
Just a wild speculation, or better yet, they're even going, we would love to have some folks in the community say, I want to make a Kronos that works for my country and my region, and I'm going to put that into an open source repo that Microsoft then has permission to pull that from that repo and add that to their platform. Since that was a big part, as I understand, of the directions last week, was that community contributions are making things better. So my hunch is that they would love to see us going down some road where we can start adding some of those different regional specific Kronos type operations into a public space where they can slurp that up and say, great, let's share that with people. So
Yeah, for them to maintain all of the regions, all the countries, all the permutations, all the different tax and regulatory oddities, I, it's a very expensive endeavor for them. But
Hmm.
for someone in Italy or Germany or France or whoever to make those contributions, I think it's much more cost effective.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
absolutely.
And I guess one comment on the test libraries. Um, my impression, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that in our testing, we will create a customer using the test library. It's effectively a completely empty customer record. There is a
Hmm.
customer ID, but nothing else is populated. So if I want 1,000 customers with different data, that is a non-trivial amount of work.
Hmm.
And
Right.
so while I do love the test libraries for what they are, for test data, I do not see them as a panacea, right? I still need to do a tremendous amount of work if I want to have all of those fields populated correctly with meaningful data. And if I'm going to have some data associations, maybe there's a child record or a state, city, county, zip code, whatever,
Yep.
validated fields, all of that has to be real.
Mm.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, we've got here the create customer address, and I'm not sharing my screen, so that worked well. We have create customer address where you pass in the customer record, and it will provide some of those fields for you. So you're right. You have to know that there are some different things of, do I need the customer record to have address stuff? And it will generate and spit out a little string that just fills the space of the
Yeah,
address. It's not a real address by any stretch, and
right.
it's not something that you would use this tool to then say, okay, let's test printing a check and make sure that the address fits in the envelope. You wouldn't do that with this.
Right. We
For sure.
can't do address validation for tax calculation purposes here.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So yeah, no matter how good the test libraries are, there will definitely be a threshold of which past here it will not help you. And that's true of
Yeah.
any tool. So it's just good to know what those edges are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if I guess if I've been, like I said, I've been debating this back and forth. If I go down the AlTool road, and if you saw the live stream I did starting this project, I would want to have a page where a user, the default assumption is that this is a user accessible tool with a configuration page that exposes options for the user to make this happen. And because I want my non-developer team to be able to use this tool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's an interesting. I mean, the more I think about this, the more I think, an open source package is a set of packages is a really good idea. And actually, I think I may go and annoy people at my work and say, don't you think this is something that we should just do for ourselves? So we actually have an internal thing where we've got a dummy company, we've got a sandbox company that's just populated with just a whole bunch of stuff, and we can switch it between different kind of modes and modules. So we've got one that's set up with full warehousing, and one that's set up for manufacturing, and one that we've got a big construction extension that we sell. And so one that's set up with that, and one that's set up with the subscription billing extension that we sell. And I think it seems crazy that we're still looking at and Kronos has become a smaller and smaller and smaller data set as well. Because I remember my 2009
True.
Kronos had a lot of customers and a lot of products, and all those bicycle parts. Where have they gone? I miss the bicycle parts.
They're hiding under the desks.
It's all sofas and desks now. It's very disappointing.
Yeah, it is a much smaller data set.
Yeah.
I'll have to share. I had architected a 5 company structure that was kind of a group entity of different companies that have similar sort of business practices. That each of them had different parts of the system, and that was going to be my framework for creating a lot of the scenarios that would generate the test data. Do you need to show a customer how the project and resources jobs and things like that, how all of that flows together. Well, then you should use this company of those 5. We've got test data for that. Because one of the things that they did do well by slimming down Kronos is they generally made it less confusing for customers to look at it when you're doing the demo. So it's less. It was kind of because financials, manufacturing, and advanced warehousing, advanced logistics used to be separate pieces. They smushed all those Cronoses together, and it showed.
Yeah, it did very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the challenge now is that the data is easier to understand in demo, but it's also less relatable because now the customer is looking at it going, I don't do that style of business, so what does any of that mean to me? And that can be a real challenge for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, my thinking is that would be a really neat community project for 2022. I suspect everyone is already well booked into the end of the year and already starting to go. I'm pretty sure I can take a summer vacation next year. I think.
Yeah, can we take some time off for the holidays, please?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got side projects I want to work on.
Right.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that would be a very fun thing to work on. I'll maybe look at sometime a little later this month. Maybe we can have fun brainstorming as a community over on the Discord server.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All of you watchers are a part of that, right? I'll start up a channel on chatting about that and share that document of how I had spec'd out what those different entities were and how they would be used and everything like that. And I know Microsoft is generally these days really on board with community created content that helps out make things make more sense for people. So if we as a group are going to put together something next year that maybe solves a lot of these support testing and demonstration, and I need this toolkit to generate all of that framework of a project-based company, but none of the data, so I can just get started using project, they would probably be very happy with everyone involved in that project. So
yeah, definitely.
that would be good.
With regard to the test libraries, I don't have enough experience with it over a long enough period to know. Do you have a feel for how much maintenance you think it may require 18.4, 18.5, 19, 20 as new releases come out? Are we going to need to have a DevOps pipeline with automated testing for our test data generator?
Short answer is probably. Probably should have a test run on that. But
that's a who guards the guards question, isn't it?
A little bit.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a little thing I thought I would share. It's kind of fun to look back. When I was looking at 5 today, I wanted to bring this up as part of our conversation today. Back in 5.0, they used to have, and they've kind of kept it today, but not at all the same. They used to have this setup checklist. Which what it was sequentially what are all the different things you should have set up in your system. So all of the number series stuff, all of the posting groups, all of the tariff info, and if you have tax info that you need to have come in, and it slowly worked you through all of the different steps, and eventually you start getting to customers and payment methods and terms. The order is not precisely the correct sequence, but when it's an ERP system, the setup's pretty lengthy. So I almost would imagine that something like this as part of that toolkit, where you have all the different setup tables that are things that a user might need to adjust settings on, you have these setup checklists that say, okay, are you just going to use the default like Kronos community edition posting groups, or do you want to define your own? And you could flag off, on this one I want to use the default ones, and on this one I want to import some custom ones, and be able to import maybe just data for each of those steps and tweak just okay, I'm going to use the default posting groups, but I want to create my own customers from sample data the customer gave me, and use those posting groups. So
almost like a wizard. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Yep. So some fun ideas around that. But
I like that. I didn't know that was in 5, and I'm going to go and poke around now and see if I can find it, because that's actually quite a valuable thing.
yeah, it was one of the things that I missed a lot that we did lose over time. That also, from this, you could choose to copy specific data over from other companies. So, for example, if I wanted to
Yeah.
copy from Kronos Canada to Kronos USA, I
Mm,
could choose some of the data that I haven't set up yet. It would give me a list of all of those different setups that are in that alternate company. I
mhm.
had a customer that had over 100 companies in their database, and they would set up probably 2 to 10 every year. And this was a very valuable system for them to
Yeah.
rapidly generate new companies because that's just what they needed to do for their line of business.
And I think for companies like that, I think we lose business to F&O because we can't do that kind of static data synchronization that some companies require. So if you've got 30 companies in your database and you want them all to have the same chart of accounts, it's going to diverge really quickly unless you're policing it really thoroughly. Without there being some kind of functionality that enables you to merge those things. There are things you can buy off the shelf, I think.
I would say that there are some easy ways to accomplish that with events now, because you can trigger code units to run in the background in other companies. So, for example,
Ah,
I've done customizations for people who needed to receive cash for 5 different entities in one payment and apply them to all of those different companies in
oh,
one
nice.
transaction.
Yeah.
So I've had to do that. It is definitely, you can breach the company barrier, as it were,
Okay.
even in the extension framework, but it does take some creative thinking.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, to bring this back around, I mean, are there any other questions you guys have on the library side of things? I mean, I think the hardest challenge is looking through this list and going, "Oh my God, there's 150 libraries. What's in each of them?"
Yeah.
No, there are a lot, but it is quite amazing coming from a product that did not have any of this. No test libraries, no automated testing mechanisms, no structure for even doing this. This is truly uh, amazing for me, especially as a developer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if you just need to start testing the service module because you're one of the handful of brave folks who are using the Business Central service module instead of the Dynamics 365, which I still love this. It was one of the earliest features that I learned from the beta release, so there's still a lot I like about it. But there are still all sorts of functions in here, even supported to this day, that do transactions for this part of the system. It's probably seldom used, but they still support it, so they built test libraries for it. So it's pretty phenomenal. And there are so many bits and pieces of lesser known parts of the system that I think almost the library, when you start poking through these, you go, I didn't know you could do that, which is fun.
You start teaching yourself new stuff.
Very much so.
Yeah. Excellent.
So, all right. Well, I think we're coming up on time here. So, unless you guys have some other questions, then we
No, that
can
was great. That was
probably
really
wrap up
interesting.
things.
Really
Nope,
interesting.
thank
Thank
you.
you. That was
I will
brilliant.
be referring to this in my series 2 of my development series to start to do some automated test generation.
Well, I've started watching your series, so I've started right series 1, episode 1. You know.
Really? Well,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
if you want, I have always wondered if we could grab a few non-developers and get them to write Business Central code. And I have a couple other people in mind. And personally, I think once you get past all the setup stuff,
Hmm.
all the foundation and dev environment, all that just the
Yeah,
dependencies, that's what's brutal. Once
yeah.
you get past that and you have this working dev environment, Business Central code is like the basics is remarkably easy. It
Hmm.
is, I can tell you, it is vastly easier than .NET. Absolutely, no question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm working on a pretty big project right now that, I needed some help on it just because of the number of hours it takes. If I give someone an Excel file that's got, a list of 100 tables and like each of those has 50 fields, that's something that a non-developer, you can, as long as you get them over that development hurdle, you can get them helping you as a senior developer making all those tables and pages in the right way
Mm.
Yep.
in probably only a week or two. And once they've got all that practice down, it becomes so much easier that when you do start giving them a little bit harder of work, okay, now I'd like you to make some functions that do a couple of things. Here's what you need to do. They've got a bunch of experience building those basic objects. You've overcome some of the hurdles of the how do I compile, how do I check in code, and that sort of thing. So,
Yep.
I think it's really interesting because I think I've said this to both of you that I remember the days where you could go into Object Designer and add a field in that wasn't immediately accessible to the user if they needed it. So if there was a description to field that wasn't available to them in their choose fields function, you could add that in, and now it's harder to do that. And it kind of frustrates me because there's a real shortage of developers, particularly at the minute. And there's a whole bunch of us functional guys out there who've got, pretty wide experience, but we're now sat there going, well, we used to be able to do some of this stuff and we can't. So the developers, seems like there are fewer developers, but they've got to do more stuff. And that seems very unfair to me. So that's really part of the reason why I want to learn this. That and trying to get this wretched Power App I'm experimenting with to actually work. instead of be a disastrous car crash, which is what it is at the minute.
I think as things mature, some alternative options will become available. So, for instance, adding a field on a page, Eric Hogard made his simple object designer tool, which I'm a developer, and I would tell any customer if they want 3 fields on 3 pages, I do not want that project. They should
No.
go get simple object designer, because the last thing any developer wants to do is do one customization with one field on 3 different pages,
Yeah.
because we have to maintain that. There's
Yeah.
just no value there. And so if a tool can allow a user to do that,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I don't really understand at the minute between the difference between personalized and design on BC. I sort of think,
It's a critical distinction, boy.
is it? Yeah.
It is. You can get
Okay.
yourself in trouble. I've heard some MVPs have some choice words about design, but I tell people design is a great tool in Sandbox for rapidly prototyping extensions,
Absolutely.
and then having a developer stitch together your hard effort into a fully proper tested compiled extension. That's a great use for it. But as
Yep.
far as production system, I shut design off because
Yeah.
it's
No. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. It shouldn't be there, really, I think. But
Yep.
yeah.
but it's fantastic for Sandbox. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
okay. Well, that
Okay.
brings us to
Well,
about
thank
an
you.
hour. And I appreciate you guys spending the time with us this evening. All those
Always
of
a
you watching
pleasure.
along. And yeah, so hopefully we'll have a few more of these over time. I'm always game for, like Matthew did earlier today on Twitter. He asked a question of how the heck am I supposed to figure this out in 5.0? I'm a BC person. It's a lot of fun to just answer one-off questions, and sometimes they lead to great sessions like this that, a lot of people will want the answers to the questions you're asking too. So, all right. Well, then
Superb.
appreciate everyone for joining in, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for hosting.